So indirect practices, again, they support resilience and the internal state of the person by moving attention away from the pain. This helps to create balance and self-soothing. So before going into what some of these are, I want to share one more concept and then see how all this is landing with you. So this principle of moving away from something unpleasant or difficult, as I've been introduced to it, comes from the work of Dr. Peter Levine and trauma healing and somatic experiencing. A basic way of summarizing it that I heard from one of my monastic teachers is, don't go in if you can't get out. You don't go into an experience with mindful attention unless you have the capacity to step out of it and get perspective on it. Now, this is counter to many of the mindfulness instructions we hear in the popular domain. So if you're going to be working with people who have chronic pain, it's really essential to understand this concept and why it's so important. As we know, mindfulness is not just about paying attention. It's about being aware and paying attention in a particular way, with a quality of non-reactivity, right? So this non-reactivity gets talked about in different ways. Jon Kabat-Zinn refers to it as non-judgmental awareness. We hear it referred to as equanimity. Sometimes it'll be defined more in the positive in terms of curiosity and openness, warmth, loving awareness. Jack and Tara often talk about, right, loving awareness. You see how it's paying attention in a particular way. There's certain qualities present in the mind. So it's those qualities of non-reactivity, sometimes kindness, warmth, that allow us to be in touch with what's happening without getting lost, without getting consumed, overwhelmed, or flooded by it. Because what happens if there's not enough equanimity? If we're trying to be mindful of an experience, pleasant or unpleasant, and there's not enough balance in the mind, the default underlying conditioning of our mind starts to take over, which is what? We start latching on to the pleasant things, wanting more, getting transfixed. We start reacting to the unpleasant ones, pulling away, pushing against it, fighting, judging, avoiding, resisting. So there needs to be balance in the mind. Otherwise, if it's just be mindful of it, just pay attention to it, we can end up unintentionally reinforcing the patterns of reactivity, grasping, and aversion. Is this making sense? Okay, so don't go in if you can't come out. Peter Levine and the fields of trauma healing talk a lot about how traumatic experience, and we could generalize from that and say intensely unpleasant experience. Not all pain is traumatic, but chronic pain in particular has an intensity to it, if not in the actual volume of the pain, at least in its frequency, that has an intensity to it that pulls us in. There's a quality to the experience that is transfixing. In Peter Levine's work, they talk about this as a certain kind of a vortex. It's like a gravitational pull. I think we all experience this in our own minds in different ways. Take, for example, any kind of a disagreement, problem, or conflict that has occurred for you in the last week or two. Notice how, until it's resolved, the mind kind of starts veering towards it and getting pulled into it. Even when you're not thinking about it, there can be this kind of baseline level of a sort of an anxiety inside, like something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, right? Do you know what I'm talking about here? So what's happening there is the unpleasantness of that experience has a certain pull to it. It pulls on our attention. It's like trying to drive a car whose alignment is off, and it's pulling in a certain direction. So chronic pain can have a very strong pull towards it. So indirect practices are designed to counter that pull. To counterbalance it by strengthening our capacity to place our attention outside of the pain on something else. This is creating the initial conditions in the mind to have enough balance so that we can come back to the pain and actually be with it without getting lost or consumed